Hello everyone, this is going to be my second and final video on the Heaven's Gate religious group. And that is because I found a wonderful documentary series on HBO Max that's a 4-part documentary on Heaven's Gate. So I thought it was very, very good. So if you want to know all about Heaven's Gate, you should watch that 4-part HBO miniseries. This episode is for people who don't want to do that because they either don't have HBO Max or 4 hours is a lot. So, Heaven's Gate. They were the group of, it was over 30 people who committed mass suicide in San Diego in the 1990s, the late 90s. They believed that that their souls were going to go to a spaceship that was following the Hale-Bopp comet, a Hale-Bopp companion. And they actually bought a telescope and tried to find the spaceship that was supposedly trailing behind Hale-Bopp, and they couldn't see it and returned the telescope saying that it didn't work. That was in the documentary. So they really believed in heaven being a physical place. So I'll start with how the cult started. And it started with really the leader and founder of the cult was the woman named T. And the man, David Applewhite, he went by Doe in the group. And she was really the one, from the documentary, it seemed like, who masterminded the religion, the flavor of religion that the Heaven's Gate cult utilized. And she was very into New Age things before Heaven's Gate, and then got into Heaven's Gate after doing all that New Age stuff. Now, I think that I'll start by saying what my main problems with Heaven's Gate are. First of all, as covered in the documentary, they didn't let the members of the group contact their families at all. And yet, the group leader, T, she was doing it the entire time with her daughter. So there was the hypocrisy of not letting your followers do something that you're doing. And, it caused a lot of pain to the families, and I'm sure to the followers as well, to not be able to contact their family even about their whereabouts or well-being. That's the only thing the cult did that's actually dangerous until they committed mass suicide. So, what's very interesting, guys, is that Heaven's Gate never would have committed suicide if their leader, T, she died of cancer in the 80s. And that's when they always believed in physically being taken by the UFOs. So it started out in the 70s preaching T and Doe, the David Applewhite and the woman, her name escapes me, her real name, but she went by T. They were preaching that heaven was a real place, and they would really wait for UFOs to come physically take them to heaven. And they believed that Jesus, when he ascended to heaven, he was taken up by a UFO. So they believed that aliens had come and had come 2,000 years ago, and that they were coming again to take up those who were ready to ascend to the next level. They called it the next level, heaven. And so for them, heaven is a physical place that exists in this universe, which is interesting. And that's how it started, but after T died of cancer, they were devastated, but they didn't know how to come to terms with that, where, it was supposed to be a physical lifting up by the UFOs during the rapture, but their leader died. And that's when it became their souls after death. And that's when slowly, suicide started to become a good idea of how to follow their leader to the next level. Philosophically, religiously, my main problem with where they went wrong religiously, in my opinion, is that David Applewhite, he decided that he was ready for the next level and that he did know. So basically, it's that, this world is a test. And if you're ready to enter heaven, you have to do all of these things. And they decided that they had done enough. And I would just say that you don't know that. You don't know if you're ready to enter heaven. Only God knows that. So you don't get to decide by committing suicide. It's like, I'm ready to enter heaven, so I'm going to kill myself. I think that it's like, well, if you were ready to enter heaven, then God would just take you, You would just have a heart attack or something. I feel like. So that's the main criticism I have of them religiously. But what's interesting is that the documentary called them a very Christian cult. And I did find it interesting how Christian they were. They really were like very Christian. And so the things that they did to ascend to the next level, guys, this group really did resemble like early, like really early cultish Christians. Because they were, first of all, I'll go over some things that they, just some features of their cult that were peculiar. So they were very, very against sex, to the point where a lot of the males castrated themselves. So they were against any kind of bodily pleasure. So no alcohol, no, no sex, no this or that. And so they also were very, very, I dress like this because this is how they dress, but in like not Hawaiian shirts, but a really nice crisp button up shirt, kind of like how Mormons do. And so they would all dress like that, and they lived together. They had no possessions while they were in the group. So they were a lot like a monastery. They lived what they called and what was a monastic lifestyle. So, only the group has property, and they had a very, very, very stringent set of rules. It was like, it was so stringent, like what they ate, how they dressed, everything that they did. It wasn't just you're going to wear a shirt like this tomorrow. They would tell them what they're going to wear, what shirt, so that they didn't have to make any decisions. It was all about following orders. And they would do a lot of group activities, like singing together and that kind of stuff. So at first they didn't have any money, but they eventually started getting a little bit more money when one of the group members inherited a lot of money, and so then they went around renting mansions instead of like bumming it all the time. They had bummed it before that. They used to like camp in the woods and stuff. They were that poor. They were that I was gonna say they were that Christian, because it's like the similarities that they have to like very strong, like cult-like Christianity is pretty impressive. Like, they believe that the world was about to end. They were ascetic, ascetic. So they refrained from pleasures of the flesh, including wealth and possessions. They renounced their possessions. They were very strict and orderly. And they functioned fundamentally as a group instead of as individuals. And they also had, a lot of faith in the supernatural. It wasn't really the supernatural when it began. But after T died, and then they decided that by committing suicide they would ascend to heaven, that's when it became supernatural. So, if she hadn't died of cancer, they would have just been waiting for UFOs. They would probably, if she was still alive today, they would still be waiting for the UFOs. And they would think that they're coming tomorrow. They thought that they were coming tomorrow because Christians have always, Christians throughout all of history have always thought that they're living in the end times. That's like part of being a Christian is believing that you're in the end times. It's always been like that. So, they kind of incorporated a lot of Christian themes into a UFO context. So, yeah, it's an interesting documentary. It's an interesting group. I would definitely suggest watching it if you're interested in cults or religious groups. Their website is actually still up, heavensgate.com. So, and there are some surviving members also, and surviving ex-members. So, and they're featured in the documentary. So, yeah, it's a pretty creepy thing, In my first video on Heaven's Gate, I linked David Applewhite's exit speech, and you can see, it's pretty creepy because they all killed themselves. So they were always like happy and smiling while they were in the group. Like, they all acted happy all the time. And you can see the kinds of people who joined the group were people who were very, not happy with society and weren't functioning well in this world. So they had reasons for leaving the world and forgetting the world. These individuals. They were not typically, high-functioning individuals, for example. They're, troubled individuals is what I would say. But also sometimes just curious individuals who got looped in by, the UFO stuff and being interested in that. So, yeah, overall, sad story. They started getting a lot more scrutiny after Jonestown happened in the late 70s. So Jonestown happened in the late 70s, and Heaven's Gate was already around back then. And so they were getting all this scrutiny. But they weren't even a death cult yet. They became a death cult after their leader died, T. She died, and it's like, oh well. So it was kind of interesting because it's like they did turn out to be a death cult, but only 20 years after the fact. 20 years. They seemed harmless for a really long time. So, yeah, I wish the members had been allowed to talk to their families. And I wish that they hadn't committed suicide. But besides that, a lot of them seem to enjoy the very structured lifestyle within the cult. I think castration is extreme, but, you know, they chose to, so they didn't have to. So, cool. Thank you, everybody.